When we look at everything that's happened over the last 20-something years, from the moment Bob Meyerowitz had to sell the UFC, Semaphore Entertainment had to sell it, and the Fertittas got it for nothing, for WCW-like prices. There were stories that Shane was trying to urge his dad to buy the UFC.
Yeah.
And he was always interested in different things. Whatever you want to say about Shane, he was the one who was really interested in ECW and UFC. And Vince didn't do it. If they had, do you think it would have survived? I mean, would
No.
they have? They would have had no idea what to do with it and would have ruined it, right? I mean, I'm not saying Shane would have. I'm saying once Vince got his hands on it, it would have been no respect towards what it is or what it could be. It would be, let's turn it into what I want it to be.
The only wrestling promoter, well, I won't say the only one. Let's a couple of wrestling promoters that I think could have made the UFC work would be Bill Watts or Eddie Graham. They could have made the...
Because Greg Gagne, and I mean, everyone says this and everyone dismisses them, but there's something to the idea when they say like, oh, we had an idea for something like the UFC years before it. I mean, everyone had the idea for like boxer versus this guy or a wrestler versus this guy.
Yeah.
But it's not exactly the UFC, but what about like a Vern?
No. Because, see, here's the thing. Vern's TV show in the 80s was boring as shit because Vern was still doing 1950s wrestling in 1980 something. And I know a lot of people are going to go, oh, well, Cornette, he's the same way. He's stuck in 1980, whatever the fuck. No, dipshits, listen. The idea is bring the product up to date for the modern attention span, for the modern, not instant gratification, but television gratification audience. Just don't make it phony. Don't make it silly and stupid. Don't expose it. Don't tell people what you're doing. And then that's the kind of thing that Bill Watts or Eddie Graham would have been perfect at because they did that style of pro wrestling anyway. And with a guy with Watts's mind or a guy that just knew how to manipulate people's emotions through telling physical stories like an Eddie Graham with his booking and his finishes, they could have taken the UFC, which at that point wasn't making any money and did have, all kinds of issues with getting licensed and everything with the athletic commissions. And they probably would have worked some of it, but they would have been smart enough to know that the least they worked, the better off it was, because that was part of the attraction. It was a shoot. And it's not like Watts and Eddie Graham were unfamiliar with shoot combat sports, because Watts had not only been an amateur wrestler, played pro football, but Eddie Graham was the mentor to Jack Briscoe, who was the NCAA heavyweight wrestling champion and the most outstanding amateur wrestler in the United States that year. And so they understood it would have been sort of with guys like that, it would have been like the early days of wrestling where not a lot was worked, just what made a difference and what meant something to the box office. And you'd keep it straight and you'd try to get people involved in the personalities and in the trash talking and the fight hyping. What Dana White has allowed some of the guys to do, the Conor McGregors, the Diaz brothers, because they're weird, but he knows with the top guys, he's let them cut promos and get away with stunts because he knows that helps his bottom line. But he's not going to let the whole fucking crew up and down the roster just go crazy and start cutting wrestling promos, doing wrestling entrances and whatever the fuck, because then that would diminish the strength of what he has, which is people still take it seriously and believe in it. But with certain people, Chael Sonnen's a fucking master promo manipulator from his days of being a wrestling fan. And with the guys who knew how to do it, you can tell that he'd let them. I'm not saying that anybody's working the fight or even that both sides of the equation were working the promos, but that was like Ali and Frazier. Ali knew what he was doing, but Frazier never forgave him till the day he died because Frazier wasn't smart to it, and Ali couldn't smarten him up because Frazier couldn't cut a believable promo working. He had to be mad. So, point I'm making is with Vince, he would have re-racked the whole goddamn thing to fit his interests and obsessions and whatever else. And I think that would have probably doomed the UFC. Shane had the idea. Shane always liked shit. I mean, of course, Shane's ideas have been all over the place. What was it? The Raw Underground Fight Club.
Dabo Kato. But Shane always likes underground shit like that. The concept of it, Fight Club, fighting, testosterone shit, people in arenas screaming and yelling over something. Shane got that from his dad. And he saw an opportunity at buying something for a song that had tremendous upside. He, just being Vince's father, and especially it being 20 years ago, I don't think he had realized that Vince is not the perfect promoter for every endeavor in the world, and he probably would have mucked up the UFC. But an old-time wrestling promoter of days gone by, when credibility was important and they knew how to rein things in and work just enough to sell tickets, an old-time wrestling promoter could have taken the UFC and done something with it. I mean, not that Dana White hasn't, but more than Vince would have, because Vince would have turned it into showbiz too. But did UFC need a Bill Watts, or did UFC need a Sam Muchnick?
Well, maybe both. Because when you think about it, I think Dana White's more Bill Watts than Sam Muchnick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's no Sam Muchnick in Dana White, no.
So, I think that the bombasticness would have driven of a Bill Watts and the guys that he would have had a powerhouse Hobbs in there, no doubt about it. But that would have been more, the bombasticness of Watts and the way that he presented things would have been better for UFC than the Vince McMahon, philosophy being in charge. But I think probably with the success they've had, ultimately the right people bought UFC. I don't think anybody else but Dana White and Joe Silva, an old-time wrestling fan who basically applied wrestling matchmaking to a shoot sport. And when the sale happened, he said, fuck it, thank you very much. I'll take my minuscule percentage, which is now worth millions of dollars. You'll never see my fucking ass again. And we haven't. But they made the right decision of, of who'd be running that thing to get it worth $4 or $5 billion.